and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon. I'm a retired 27-year veteran of the NYPD. I retired out of Manhattan North Homicide Squad as a detective sergeant. With me today, I have my co host, excellent detective from Intelligence Division and the 60 Squad, Phil Grimaldi, all the way from Brooklyn. Straight out of Brooklyn, I should say. How's it going today, Phil?
Pretty good, Bill. Thank you for having me back.
It's great having you here. I think the people in the chat love Phil Grimaldi from Brooklyn. They like it that you're coming straight out of Brooklyn. Anyway, folks, Police Off the Cuff and Real Crime Stories, thanks to you guys, the fans of this show, we've added like another almost 4,000 subscribers in the last 2 weeks. And we have a lot of people to thank for that. Most of you guys who are in the chat right now, we thank you for liking this show. We thank you for subscribing. We thank you for giving a thumbs up. Some of you other folks joining our Patreon, we really appreciate that too, because that helps us keep this show alive. You know, nothing these days is for free. We keep the show going. And, you know, if you want to keep in contact with us, we're on Instagram. That's our Instagram address right there. And we're trying to grow. And one of the main architects behind this who's helped us grow a great deal is Duty Run. And everyone knows Duty Run because most of you guys that are fans of this show are also fans of Duty Run. On the screen you see right now, you can subscribe to us on YouTube and leave a comment. Let us know what you're thinking, all right? Or you can follow us on Facebook. And we also have a website that you could check us out on our website. And that's policeoffthecuff.com. We got a lot of stuff on there. We got a lot of good things coming up. And we'd appreciate if you'd, again, subscribe and give us that thumbs up. You know, Phil,
I want to just make one comment about what you were just saying. Sure. I know from internally what goes into the show. And Bill, you've really knocked it out of the park. A lot of times you're coming up with some fantastic guests. And I know that the effort that you put in and all the hard work you've been for the last, I can't even imagine how many episodes you've done, but hat off to you. And I know that you're always working on it. And we're going to continue to do great shows. And welcome to all those new guests and the new subscribers.
Phil, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And, you know, as they say, birds of a feather flock together. And that's why I choose you to come on these real crime shows. You got that knowledge database that I really appreciate. You know, folks, this case now is 31 days old. And we're talking about the missing case of a 5-year-old girl. And I mean, it's too hard to just imagine if this was your little girl, about how you would be freaking out over this. You know, I mean, it's just too much to imagine that, you know, the grief and the upset nature of this. There she is with her 3 little brothers. It's too hard to imagine. But we're gonna approach this from a law enforcement perspective, because that's where me and Phil came from. Phil and I, proper English. I'll use the proper English. That's where we came from, is a law enforcement background. And one of the things I think we always have to go back to, and I'm always enthralled at, was the very first interview. And I'm gonna show that interview because I think it's extremely pertinent to this case. And I'm just gonna play it. I'm gonna play it again. I'm gonna put it on the screen, and I'm gonna play it now. And we're gonna just analyze that.
A lot. I know she didn't walk away from this property by herself or off this yard by her swing. I feel in my heart that somebody has came up here and took her, has lured her away from here. Me and my mother and her were planting flowers. And we went in after we got done washing our hands, and she got a piece of candy from Grandma. And she wanted to go back over and see her brothers. And I said, okay. And I walked her all the way over to the porch. And I watched her walk into the kitchen where the boys were watching TV. And I told the boys, I said, watch Summer. I'll be back. And within 2 minutes, I came back. And I asked the boys where their sister was. And they said, she went downstairs, Mom, to play with her toys in the playroom. I said, okay. And I yelled downstairs for her a couple times, and I didn't get no answer. which was unusual because usually she always answers me. And so I went down there to check, and she was nowhere in sight. She was just gone. I don't go on walks around here or runs because I'm scared of the bears and snakes and even the coyotes that are around here. Well, whoever has my daughter, I pray and hope that they have not harmed her and they bring her back to us safe and sound.
Just go to the FBI, the police, and clear it up. I mean, I don't know. It seems kind of elusive.
It's really strange that I've never seen this truck and I've never heard of it until just recently. But I wish they would come forward and explain themselves. And if you're not a suspect, at least come forward and say what you've seen. She was a tomboy. I shaved my head. She wanted to have her head shaved like me and the boys did.
She tried to shave her head
She tried
in
to
the
shave her
back
head
and make
herself.
it. I think you can see it in some of the pictures, and it was getting out of control. So we decided to shave her head off and let it grow back long, and she shaved her head so she wouldn't feel bad, and but it didn't bother her at this point. Well, I knew right away that she was abducted. You know, I knew that right away, and that's what I told them from the beginning. But they have to go through their, I forget the word.
Investigation.
They have to do one step at a time, I guess. But I'm sorry that they had to spend so many man hours in these woods and everything. I've seen them limping and everything else, and I feel for them. But I just wish there was a way that neighbors could search neighbors' houses, and then if they're not willing, get a search warrant or something. But there's just no way you can search every single house, in the eastern United States or whatever. But I wish there was a way. Just thankful for the person or persons that's doing that, out of love, and trying to get information and trying to get her found. We thank them from the bottom of our hearts.
That means a lot.
And we thank everybody who's trying so hard and praying so hard. And she's an awesome young lady, and we just want her back. But, yeah, there's always going to be that way in this world, and we just want to focus on the good friends and Christian people that are trying to help us and praying for us and praying for Summer. And we thank them from the bottom of our hearts. And that's the kind of people we try to relate with and socialize with. So we don't know anything about, no red truck, or we hardly know many of our neighbors. I mean, because we just try to be around good people. I mean, and we do have good people in this area. We found out since this has all happened. We got some real good neighbors and good folks everywhere. But
the most important thing is to bring Summer home safe. I'm sorry that you feel this way about us, but we love our children with everything we have. We've never went without, thanks to Summer's daddy and my husband. He's always provided for us and has worked as much as he could and can and still is. And I'm sorry that you guys feel that way, but
What do you think, Phil?
Well, I think that interview is very telling. I'm not a body language expert. However, I do have extensive experience with interview and interrogation. And from that interview, it looks like when there's specific detail being told about the day that she disappeared, the mom seems to direct her answer away from the person that's asking the question. She always seems to be looking away when she's talking about a specific detail. But however, when she's talking about an opinion of, that the husband took care of them and Summer's dad kept them from having want, basically taking care of the family, she looks like she's looking directly in the direction of the person who's doing the interview. Now, that doesn't mean that she's responsible for the disappearance and whatever happened to Little Summer. But I just think that she's not, from the body language that I'm seeing, it doesn't look like she's being 100% honest in her answers. The look obviously is, not very good. They both look like they might be on some type of intoxicant, could be prescription drugs, God only knows. And then also the father talks about the bizarre behavior. He said it got out of control with the shaving of the head. That's kind of a little bit of a red flag for me. Like, what was going on in that home that this kid decided to shave the back of her head, and when the father's words, it got out of control. They decided to shave her whole head so it would grow back long. So, there's some kind of behavior that was exhibited in that interview that I don't like. There's also the past behavior about the shaving her head that I don't like. And again, I don't have privy, you don't have privy to the case folder. We don't know exactly what direction that law enforcement is going in. But based on that interview, there's a few red flags that I think need to be addressed. Again, the body language, I'm not an expert on it, but I do have a lot of, as you do as well, Bill, experience with interview and interrogation. And body language a lot of times does tell you whether or not a person is being truthful or dishonest. So those little couple of things just off of that interview is what I would be focusing on.
Phil, I don't like when body language experts talk in absolutes. For example, different body language is different for different people. So certain people exhibit certain types of body language, and that's indicative to their personality.
Agree with you 100%. And I'll let you finish and then I'll add something to that. But I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. So when you get alleged body language experts that just across the board say, oh, he's crossing his arms, he's being deceptive, or he's being defensive. Oh, he's rubbing his face. Oh, that's another sign of deception because he's trying to hide his face. It can't be viewed as across the board. That's what it means. Each interview is different. Each person is different. And in the context of the interview, that is how body language has to be analyzed.
That point that you just made, I think, is exactly right on point. I think that body language experts usually speak in generalities, and that's okay. I do feel that body language for me in my interviews is exactly to the point what you said. As I would speak to a person and I would start to develop a rapport with them, and I see when they're talking about something that I know is fact, I kind of pick up on their body language. It might not be something very, very direct, but it might be something as easy as they're looking away when they're answering about specific details. Whereas when I'm asking them pedigree information or something that I know the answer to, they're looking directly at me. So, you're going to develop that sense of body language, just as you said, Bill, over the course of time in an interview. 100%. I agree with that. It's really, it becomes an art form, I guess you can say. As you're, doing this interview, you'll pick up on it. And from being an investigator, being a detective, it just comes naturally to you. But you made very, very good point there, Bill.
Well, thank you, Phil. I did used to do this.
I know, right?
I did have a few years of experience doing this. One of the things I want to get back to, folks, is that a police procedure in a missing person case, when they get called to a scene, especially what we would call a special category missing person, which this is, it's a child under 10, and also under circumstances that indicate involuntary disappearance. So it's a special category. The first thing the police should do or should have done is to search the house that she was reported missing from. Do an extreme in-depth search of that house. I'm sure they did that. That's police procedure 101. And I'm just really telling that for the benefit of all listeners, not for the benefit of the police. I'm sure the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the local police, and of course the FBI is in on this case. They know what they're doing in this case. So that's the first thing. You want to make a comment on that, Phil?
Well, I think right off the bat, you look at the JonBenet Ramsey case. That was one of the first things they did, and they found her in the home. So, I mean, like you said, that's police procedure, routine police procedure 101. You'd search, you'd start in the home, and then you'd, go out, search the immediate area around the home, and then you would go further from there. So, yeah, that's obviously, I would say 100% that was done.
You know, one of the things now, she was reported missing on June 15th at allegedly 6:30 at night, give or take a few minutes here or there. Now, that day is the day that is very suspect and is causing a lot of people to ask lots and lots of questions. Now, that morning, and I don't want to give specific timestamps because we don't really have the specific timestamps that are available to the police. As I said, we're not privy to the case folder. NYPD Captain Andrews DeStefano, thank you so much for the $4.99 super chat. He's one of our good friends, a big supporter of Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Now, with that said, they went to 3 or 4 different locations. They were supposedly in the car was the 3 boys, Summer, and the grandmother. And at some point, they picked up a 15-year-old boy by the name of H. And they allegedly there were 3 or 4 stops. One was the hospital. One was the drugstore, right? Walgreens drugstore to pick or drop off a prescription. The other one was a convenience store where they picked up the milk jugs where later on someone was seen sleeping on with a head against. And the other place was a swimming hole where they killed about 20 minutes prior to getting all their errands together. Now, that's a lot of things to have on a timestamp. And Phil, you know, and as well as I know, if we were the investigators in this case, we would have exact timestamps on all those stops. And one of the ways you can do that is A, Walgreens, what time were they in there based on the video in the store, based on the receipt from the cash register? What time were they in the convenience store? Same thing, video, receipt for their purchase. The swimming hole, basically they took pictures at the swimming hole. So
Right.
there's another timestamp. Going back to drop off H, that's in their cell phone hitting cell towers at a very specific location. So all of these activities are generating timestamps, which we, being internet guys, Real Crime Stories, we don't have the exact timestamps that the police have. I know there's a lot of internet sleuths that swear they know the exact timestamps, and I don't think that's very accurate. But that is very, very, very important, those timestamps.
Of course, that's important. And I think what you alluded to was there's 3 or 4 stops. The immediate thing that I would request after getting that information, if I was the investigator assigned to the case, I'd want to go to those locations and do a canvass and try and find witnesses to see if they saw Summer with them when they went to this hospital and they went to this convenience store and they went to Walgreens and the swimming hole. So there would have to be some canvassing done for witnesses to see. Now, just because those timestamps, 100% right, Bill, you got receipts and you got video cameras, we might be able to place them there. But was she with them? That's going to be an important factor, because just cause they're reporting that she was with them at all those places and then they claim she disappeared from the home doesn't mean that it's true or that's what actually took place. So I'm sure that the investigators probably went and canvassed these locations to find out. Maybe a person might have, noticed a cute little kid, and yeah, she was there. So they'll have not only a time frame and a time stamp of exacts what time they were at these locations, but they'll also have information, was Summer with them, which I think is very important, because if the family members or whoever's reporting it is suspect, their story might not be 100% correct. Obviously, she could have disappeared the day before or earlier that day or something. So I think that's very important points that you brought up, Bill.
Kim Claflin in the live chat, she wrote, if you go back and look at pictures of that baby for the last year, look at the major changes in her face and behavior. She was always protecting her crotch area. Now, I don't know if that's a fact or not. That's something probably that a child abuse expert might be able to spot, or a sexual abuse expert. I didn't see those pictures where that was specifically mentioned, but Kim, I believe
sounds
that
like a question for Irma Rivera, who was a specialty detective in the Special Victims Squad.
Yeah, I mean, Special Victims is a very unique type of investigative job on all police departments. And believe it or not, I've always considered those people to be really doing God's work. At least on the NYPD, there was 2 areas of special victims. One was sex crimes and one was child abuse. And being a child abuse investigator is one of the most difficult
Extremely
investigations.
difficult. Absolutely.
And not the investigation, but the toll that it takes on
Sure.
the investigator. Getting back to this, Phil, we don't have any clear timestamp. So at some point, they all come back. And I just want to show, I have, this picture's not all that clear, but I'm just, because it's reproduced from a video image, a still video image. That's the famous picture, or at least famous on the internet, of someone's fallen asleep in the car. And I guess this would be after the swim, after the convenience store, after the drugstore, dropping off H. I don't know the exact chronology of that, but Barbara Butcher, who is a retired chief of staff of the New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, who is the most knowledgeable scientist I know on the science of death. She looked at this photo, and the one she looked at, of course, was much clearer than this one. And she said there was no doubt in her mind from analyzing this photo, based on many factors, that Summers is alive. The pinkness of her lips, the way she was holding her hands, the fact that the way her neck tilted. Barbara, she was on the show last week, and she gave many, many reasons why she felt that Summers was alive.
Yeah, I think the picture that we looked at when you had Barbara on, it was much clearer picture, and you could see the color of the lips, you could see the color of the skin, and those were the first two things that jumped out at me when I saw that picture when I was watching that episode. It was obvious to me that that child was not deceased. Barbara Butcher basically came to that same conclusion. And there was just so many things that we went through, or that you guys went through on that episode, that indicated that that looked like a sleeping child, that she wasn't deceased. But again, with that picture, if the family's claiming that that picture was taken on the day that she disappeared, whatever cell phone they used to take that picture, there's going to be a timestamp. And as we learned from Mike Fabosi, that was on previously, that we can find out the exact location where the picture was taken. So if the family is telling us the picture was taken at 2:00 in the afternoon and we were at this location, and then from the cell phone, once we do a subpoena on the cell phone, it tells us that, or it tells us something different, we'll know that there's whether or not the family is being truthful in their answers to investigative questions.
You know, some of the folks in the chat are claiming that Don Wells is a noted sexual predator, that he abused his own sister from the age of 5 onwards. We specifically don't have the police records of that occurring. I can't, to me at this point, it's a rumor, and I can't just put it out there as fact. But there's many times I've heard this from different people on the internet in regards to this case, but until it's verified by law enforcement or child services, I can't really comment on that. What I can comment on is Don Wells certainly is no angel. He's got a record in 3 different states, and he has one of the big things, his criminal record is his domestic abuse criminal record. So he speaks softly and with purposefully, but he's not a nice guy. All right. He's been in prison, and being in prison doesn't necessarily mean you can't turn over a new leaf and become a new person. But I always go back to that saying by the great John Jay College professor, past conduct is very indicative of future conduct,
Yeah, I like that. I like that saying, because it's obviously got some weight to it. That domestic violence case that you're talking about, that was only a few months before little Summer disappeared, where he appeared and she called 911, and the police came and they arrested him with an illegal handgun. The judge issued an order of protection for the mom and for the family, and she dropped the charges eventually. So there's obviously there's a history on both sides of the parents in this case, the mother and the father, with criminal records and past history and behavior. So I'm sure that that's being looked at, and you know, there's going to be a successful conclusion to this case. I feel very strongly about that.
Yeah, I do too. Ladybug asks, could the white buckets with flowers near grandma and the white buckets in the red truck be connected? Well, we can't really connect them until we have the red truck. You know, when you're talking about linkage, and that's what you're talking about, evidence linkage, to compare one piece of evidence to another, you have to have both pieces of evidence.
Sure.
So Ladybug, great question, but that's the answer. Unless we have the red truck, we can't connect the dots there.
You know, Bill, I want to say something about the interview that you showed with the two parents. When they talk about this red truck, they almost dismiss it, but make out that that's what happened. She was abducted, you know? So that's another indicative thing in the interview that's a little bit that I would have pressed on if I was the investigator. I would have called them in and said, you know, when you spoke about this red truck, you kind of dismissed it, but you're very positive that little Summer was abducted. So I would try to get into that kind of line of questioning.
You know, folks, if you're new to this channel and you're not subscribed to Police Off the Cuff on YouTube, please do so. Just hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. And we're also, of course, on Facebook. You want to make comments, you want to speak to us, you want to send comments to us. I try to answer as many comments as possible. However, if I answered all of them, I would do nothing else but that. We're starting to get a big audience. I'm very happy about that. And folks, you know, when we talk about our perspective on this, we're talking about from a perspective of experienced investigators. But besides my 27 years on the NYPD, 16 of those years I was in the detective bureau, and I started out in robbery. And then I went from robbery to a precinct detective squad where you investigate everything. And then from the precinct detective squad, I went to the homicide squad. So I have a great deal of investigative experience, as does my co-host, Phil Grimaldi, and he could just give you a quick little blurb on his experience.
Yeah, I retired after 22 years on the police force, and I only spent about 3 years in uniform before I went into a plainclothes assignment, which was anti-crime, which you did as well, Bill. And I did that for about 2 years. Then I went right into the investigative track. I was doing robbery investigation for a couple of years, for about 2 years. And then I went into, like you said, the precinct detective squad. I spent a large chunk of my career in the detective bureau. And in 2001, April, I was assigned to the intelligence division. And around 9/11 is when I was assigned to do just counterterrorism investigation until I retired in 2003. So, I mean, my career, and as well as your career, we've had a large taste of everything that the NYPD can throw at you. I would not say that I did everything that you could possibly do, but when it comes to investigation, I had pretty good experience, as you did as well, Bill. And homicide investigation is a little bit different than a lot of the other investigations, because the responsibility that's put on you when a person dies and is killed is a tremendous responsibility, and you, so to speak, have to speak for the dead. You are now trying to get justice for that person. Now, I'm not saying that in this case that it's a homicide investigation. All indications are it might lead to that, based on the fact that she's missing for so long. I hope not. I hope I'm wrong. I hope and pray to God that she's alive. But just trying to give a background on what we do, or what we did as detectives, and you know, working in the detective bureau for the NYPD, as well as homicide investigation.
Tim Acosta, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. And Tim makes a comment that the parents are responsible for the safety and well-being of a 5-year-old, whether they were involved in her disappearance or not. And that's his opinion. And I agree with you, Tim. You're 100% correct. The buck stops with the parents. That's for sure. You know, I just want to get back to the investigation. You know something, let's go to a quick commercial break, and we'll get right back to the investigation. We'll switch gears, but I just want to read this little message. Folks, if you're looking maybe to move down south to a warmer climate, a climate with less taxes, a climate maybe politically more friendly than New York, among other places, Carol Waters sells real estate down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. For 20 years, she was a bartender at Fitzpatrick's Hotel in Manhattan. Her and her husband, Rob Mahan, who was a former NYPD police officer, who later rolled over to the fire department, are a team down in Myrtle Beach. In fact, they're $1 million salespeople. So whether you're looking for a condo, a rental home, or a regular home and you want to move down to Myrtle Beach, give Carol Waters a call, 914-261-6681, or you can email her at carolwaterssellsmb@gmail.com.
Hey, Joe Murray is a terrific trial attorney. Joe is a retired member of the NYPD for about 15 years on the police force, and he is taking that knowledge and expertise into the law field. So if you have need for an attorney, God forbid you wind up with a problem, you can get a hold of Joe Murray at jmurray-law.com. That's his website, jmurray-law.com. He can also be emailed at joe@jmurray-law.com. That's joe@jmurray-law.com. And his telephone number is 646-838-1702, 646-838-1702. Joe Murray, terrific attorney, big supporter of Police Off the Cuff. You can catch him on previous episodes and on Duty Run Show as well.
Thank you, Phil. One of the things I wanted to get back to is that we talked about the timeline and all the errands they did on that day. Walgreens, stopping off at the hospital, stopping off at the swimming hole,
What
stopping
was
off at
the hospital stop for? Do you know what that was about?
Yes, it was for the grandmother who had something wrong with her leg.
Okay.
Which also brings to point later on when they claim they're out planting flowers.
It was like an emergency room visit, or?
Yeah, somewhat like that. She was
Okay.
visiting to take a look at her leg.
Okay.
Anyway, my whole thing is at some point they drove home after all these errands. We don't know specifically, again, the timestamp. When did they go home? When did Summer ever get home? That's my thing. How do we know that she ever returned home other than Candace's word that she went home and Candace's word that she was planting flowers with her and the grandmother? And at some point she went into the house. The boys were there. She went down to the basement, and that was the last time she was ever seen. So to me, and I've said this before, the most important interview is of those three young boys, because you should be able to get the truth out of them. Did they ever see their sister? Did they ever say, how about the grandmother? Were they, I mean, obviously, Phil, we know you got to interview people separately. You could never interview people together, and that's for the benefit of all listeners. People always have to be interviewed separately, or else they'll try to get their stories together and say the same thing. And that's why you interview them separately. But to me, the interview of those three boys is almost like the smoking gun interview.
Yes, that's definitely key, because that will determine if Summer actually did make it back to the house that day. And the theory that the family seems to be pushing is that she was abducted from their location, from their property. And I find that highly suspect, only because, now I'm not saying it's impossible, only because it was the middle of the day. There seemed to be, according to their statement, some type of activity that was going on. So for a person or persons to come onto the property and to abduct a little Summer doesn't seem very likely to me. And I think,
Phil, just on the screen, you're looking at the aerial view of their house.
Right. And listen, is it possible that someone could have snuck up there and grabbed her quickly and retreated with her? I doubt that there would be no kicking and screaming and, someone else that was home. It wasn't like there was only one person home. They could have been down in a basement with a radio playing and not hear it. There was a lot of people at home that day, according to their interview and to their statements. So I think you made a great point that the key is the younger kids and the grandmother to give a timeline and to tell us that they saw her there, that she was there, and to back up the statements of the mother and father saying that we were doing this and we were doing that, and the little Summer went downstairs and we never saw her again. So I think that's very, very important. Again, I'll stress this. Not impossible, an abduction, not impossible, but I think it's unlikely based on what we know, looking at the terrain, looking at the area, and knowing that it was early evening and there were a lot of people home. And I just think that it would be very unlikely that that's what occurred. Not impossible. I could be wrong, but it just seems unlikely to me at this point.
Phil, with the remoteness of this house, look at the aerial view. Look at the woods and the forest and the nasty terrain all around there. You would have to go there on purpose. You wouldn't just bump into this house being on some, main road and bump into this house. You would have to go there purposefully. So if it was an abduction, the person would have to know about this house and know about this 5-year-old girl. That's why I always felt that and I still feel the answer to this case is in the circle of Candace and Don.
Yes, I agree. It would have to be a targeted abduction, meaning someone would have to have known the terrain. They would have targeted the young girl, and that's not impossible. It's still quite possible. But I think that based on, and I've said this before, the way that law enforcement seems to be moving in this investigation, doing these extensive searches, and their posture in this, I don't think that that's where this thing is going, where this case is leading. So again, don't have intimate knowledge of the case folder, not part of the actual investigation, just making it an educated guess based on what I'm seeing and what knowledge and information we do have.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to put the incident commander on the screen, who they've been, they're still doing this search, but it's sort of been toned down a little bit. The search, it's not at the level it was, and you can understand it can't possibly be because of the size and the amount of people that would be necessary to keep this investigation going. It's.
Back right now, in essence, all we're pretty much going off of is, like I said, is anything credible leads, credible information.
Officials announced on June 27th that the ground search for Summer Wells would be on an as-needed basis.
I don't feel like that I made the decision to quit. We haven't quit. It was just we had to scale back, get our bearings back together, allow these people to rest and recuperate, to figure out where can we go next. What can we hit aggressively next? What can we do to find Summer Wells?
Tim Coop led almost 1,200 people from 120 different agencies during the 13-day search in the Beech Creek community. That call to scale back still weighs heavy.
Speaking with command staff, speaking to subject matter experts that were involved from other agencies out of state, getting together every day. Hey, this is what we've covered. This is the probability. This is putting all these things together to make the decision. I can say made the decision easier, but it didn't. Still, at the end of the day, it was very difficult to make the decision of scaling back operations to only go off of credible leads.
Coop is still working with authorities as tips come in and is in touch with those who assisted from in and out of state. He assures that every crew is ready whenever the call comes.
Even if it's ground that has already been searched 1 to multiple times, be in contact with TBI, Hawkins County Sheriff's Department, if it's something they feel as though needs to be a credible search, needs to go back in and look over things again, we're right there with them.
Captain.
So you could see, Phil, a massive job that is, the massive job to search the amount of acreages. What he said, there was like 1,200 people searching at one point.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that in the beginning, it's a search and rescue type mission if there's a chance that she's lost in the woods and still alive. And maybe they scaled back because a period of time had passed. And if, she was lost in these woods or that the chances of her being alive diminished. So that may be why they scaled back. But, I would really love to have intimate knowledge to really make a good assessment of what's going on, because if I just have a feeling that they know where they're going with this. I'm sure that the early on investigation interviews, all the things that we talked about were done, and we don't know the results of those things. We talked about the interviews of all the locations where they had stopped. We talked about the interviews of the brothers, and we talked about the interview of the parents. So whatever the results of those interviews and what other evidence was recovered, we don't really know. So that would give us a much better idea of where this case was going,
Phil, one of the things that I always like to talk about, and that comes out of my being a criminal justice professor for 10 and a half years, and that is the art and the science of investigation. And the art of the investigation, of course, is all the policing skills, interview, interrogation, just regular police work, police procedure. That's the art form. The science is what we talked about the other day with Mike Fabozzi, talking about the electronic devices, the cell phones, the cell towers, all of the possible. We spoke about geofencing the other night with Mike Fabozzi, which was a topic that is pretty damn complex. We talk about license plate readers that scan thousands of license plates. And that is part of the science also, because that data is available to investigators. Of course, cell towers, tolls, toll booth cameras in stores, electronic devices of all kinds, laptops, computers. That is the science of the investigation. Of course, so is forensic evidence. And right now, there is no forensic evidence to this investigation. But when the art and the science of investigation comes together, that's when it becomes much more powerful. And that's when we're going to get results.
Bill, you're 100% right on that. And I think that, a lot of people don't really know that when a homicide occurs, the prosecutor in the area become involved in the case. So they have an input on direction. And a lot of times, they'll base their input on interviews. And we don't know if there was any search warrants where evidence was recovered. We don't know anything about that. So there may be some things that we're not being able to include in because we don't know. But I think that the fact that she hasn't been found and the prosecutors are probably very plugged into the case, and they may be, holding off on making any statements or pointing any fingers because they want to try and find her. And then I'm sure there'll be developments with the local district attorney's office or the prosecutor, whoever it is, that might shed a little bit more light on the things that did occur. Maybe, talk about how they came to where they're going to be in the future. So that's one of the things that happens in homicide investigation. The local prosecutor is usually notified on the day. If it's a homicide, they're notified right away. In a case like this, even though it's not a homicide case yet, I'm sure the local prosecutor is involved because they're going to play a big part in, search warrants and subpoenas and things like that, especially electronic devices.
Phil, I'm being advised in the chat by K.H. Walker that the boys did not go on the errands or the swimming trip. I was, K.H. Walker, you may be 100% right, but I had seen some pictures of the boys swimming. And that's why I say we can't depend on the information on the internet to be 100%. We're not privy to the case folder. That's something I would know 100% if we were privy to part of the actual investigation and not the internet investigation of this. But K.H. Walker, thank you very much. If that happens to be true, I will check on it to see if that is in fact true. But it still is important in the way that the boys allegedly saw Summer go down into the house and go down into the basement. So that's one of the most important things that we were talking about. The other thing, when I talk about the art and the science of investigation, I would imagine because this family seemed to have some problems that they must have had a social worker assigned to the family. They had domestic violence issues. It seems like the mom and the pop potentially have drug and alcohol problems.
I would think that social workers would have been notified when that collar went down where she had the husband arrested with the gun. I mean, there's children in a home. If they weren't notified, they should have been. But I didn't mean to interrupt you, Bill.
No. And my point being is that social workers are also investigators. What do they know about these kids? What do they know, about the family? What do they know about Summer? Those are that's part of the big investigation. It's really part of the big investigation. I just want to bring this up too. I have two boys. They're grown men now. But when they were younger, my wife and I both worked full time. So we had what's called au pairs. We had girls from other countries come. They lived with us and they watched our kids. And I knew, of course, from being a police officer, I wanted the amount of people that had access to my children kept to the barest minimum. And one of the first things I always asked the au pair was, do you have a boyfriend? Oh, you do? Fine. Don't ever bring him around my house. And I mean, that may sound crazy, but it's not crazy to me. I'm glad you have a boyfriend. I hope you're very happy. Just don't bring him around my house or around my kids. If I hear that happen, you're going to have some problems, you know? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because who were involved in the circle of Candace and Don Wells? Who were in their circle? There could have been some, you know, I love that expression, birds of a feather flock together. They weren't hanging out with, you know, they were probably hanging out with people that were just like them. And I hate to pass, but we've seen who they are. They both have criminal histories. They both have alcohol and drug problems. You think they weren't hanging out with the same people? So in that circle potentially could be a wrongdoer that was around their children.
Sure, 100%, Bill, and I agree with you. I mean, I have three daughters, and you know, we always tried to keep the circle tight, so to speak, of who was around them. And you know, in this day and age, sleepovers and this and that. And I would always point the question, and I would always have the conversation with my wife: if our daughter is going to sleep there, who's the brother? Who's the cousin? Who's the dad? Who's going to be home in the house? Those are all very important questions. And listen, we're safety minded because of our background in law enforcement, but also we know from the last, you know, 40 years, 50 years, whatever it is, of all these horrible things that took place. So you try to be a little bit more security conscious when it comes to your children. So, you know, and obviously, like you said, the circle around the parents, whoever was close to them could possibly be responsible for the disappearance of little Summer.
Phil, that's where the answer is. I'm telling you that right now. And I've discussed on this show, and I've discussed on Duty Ron's show, the concept of victimology. And victimology is very simply the study of the victim, which includes a huge backgrounding on the victim. Find every single thing about the victim you can possibly find out. Better Angels, thank you so much for your $14.99 super chat. And I'll read your comment. Thank you for your professionalism and service. Really appreciate your sharing and experience. Thank you, Better Angels. And I appreciate you and your support. If you haven't subscribed to Police Off the Cuff, please do so. You know, I'm Bill Cannon. I'm a retired NYPD homicide sergeant. And with me is retired Detective Phil Grimaldi. I hesitate to say second grade because someone the other day accused me of saying Phil was a second-rate detective. No, there's on the NYPD, there's grades. There's third, there's second, there's first. A second-grade detective on the NYPD makes sergeant's pay. So it's nothing to sneeze at. But I just hesitated to say that again, Phil.
I hear you. I hear you. And obviously, that's not the case. We're good friends, and we have a professionalism between us with regard to the show. And I just look at you as a colleague and a good friend. And the show is obviously doing well, and it's a testament to your hard work, Bill. I've known you for a while, and just about every time I've been talking to you in the recent past, you've been doing something for the show, whether it be booking a guest, doing a banner, trying to improve things, hiring a producer and stuff. And, you know, Duty Ron as well did a lot to help this show along. And we talked about that earlier, but yeah, I'm very, very proud and very impressed to be part of it.
Thank you, Phil. Rebecca M. in the chat says, have they checked for videos of them at the hospital? Hang on, at the hospital, the drugstore, the grocery store, did they stop for gas? Rebecca M., that's one of the checklists that I'm sure that the detectives, the investigators have done. They would go to all the stops. They would check all the timestamps. They would collect all the video, because there's something in investigation where if you can't rule something in, then you got to rule something out. And part of the timestamp stuff is to just not rule things in, but potentially rule things out. And that's why when you hear me and Phil speak of timestamps, they're just so important, because they can totally change everything. They can refute information. They can say, oh, no, they couldn't have done that because they were here at that time. So that's why timestamp information is so important. I want to just, Phil, here we are. We're in 31 days after she was reported missing. Investigators, first responders, the local police, they got to be getting frustrated. They want to solve this case so much. I mean, you saw how passionate that captain was from, I think it was the local fire department. He was almost in tears, it seems, and he's probably overworked, and they are so passionate to try to find this girl. So having said that, even the investigators have to have a level of frustration right now. Can you maybe speak upon that a bit?
Yeah, I'm sure they are frustrated, and especially the searchers. I mean, they're going through some heavy terrain. I mean, they're talking about bears and snakes and coyotes and all of that. So it's obviously quite dangerous doing those type of searches. But there may be stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't know, and they may have a very good idea, and they just want to find Summer before they proceed with any further, let's say charges or anything like that in the case. So listen, police work is tedious. It's not easy. It's not like a 1 hour episode of Law and Order or NYPD Blue. A lot of things take time, especially when it comes to cell phone records and videotapes and things like that. These things aren't, they don't happen in a minute or two. So the frustration, I'm sure, is there. But if you're a professional, you just plow through the frustration and you move forward with the investigation. And hopefully there'll be a conclusion to it sometime soon. And that's what makes you get up every morning and proceed with your job, with your tasked with.
100%. Barbara Kaiser says, what about a dry drowning? She was underwater during their swimming trip. It can be up to 24 hours before pulmonary edema can set in and kill. Did that happen and the parents panicked? Barbara, could that have happened? I'm not saying it couldn't have happened. We don't know. We don't have Summer to do an autopsy and find out if in fact she's no longer with us, and we hope and pray that she is still with us. But if something like that did happen, then of course autopsy would determine that, or what the cause of death was. We don't even want to think about that, although it is 31 days, and it's we're talking about the frustrations of the investigators. In addition, what Phil just mentioned is that, of course, the investigators have a lot more information that they're not sharing with the public. And in one way, I admire that, but in another way, I get frustrated, just like a member of the public, that we're not hearing updated information on what may have happened and real solid information of the results of their investigation. But something, they're doing that for a reason. And historically, the FBI, of course, is always very tight-lipped. Phil and I, being members of the NYPD, we felt that the department gave too much information to the press, to the point that it endangered the case at some point. And we didn't like that at all. And it can actually really hurt the case. But they've been very closed-mouthed. One of the things I want to touch upon, too, is that they talk about this red pickup truck. And I have, this was put out by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. It's either a Toyota, possibly 1998 to 2000, maroon or red, Toyota Tacoma with a full bed ladder rack along with white buckets in the truck bed. Now, one of the things you have to realize about information like this is being given to them by a witness. Could be one witness, could be two witnesses. But witnesses tell different stories sometimes. I always remember the Beltway sniper case, which was a huge case down in Washington, D.C., where a sniper was just killing people, just shooting people at gas pumps in front of supermarkets. And there was rumored to be a big white truck at the scene of these shootings. And there may well have been a big white truck at the scene of these shootings. But guess what? The big white truck had nothing to do with these shootings. It turned out to be a Chevrolet Caprice that the guy was laying down in the back of the trunk. And that information never came out. But during these shootings, people were seeing a big white truck. So in this information, how pertinent is the red pickup truck? Is it the exact look? It's even when you read the description, it's more than one description. It's a Toyota or possibly a Toyota Tacoma. So they don't know it. It's either red or maroon. So right there, it's telling me they're not 100% sure what this truck, but there's some other good things about it, talking about the ladder, the white seats. Someone obviously got a very good look at it. And, you know, Phil, you want to talk? We spoke about it the other night about the lawman search. You want to touch upon that quickly?
Sure. I just, with regard to this truck, it sounds to me like, based on the timeline that the parents laid out, it was either seen in the area or maybe picked up on a video camera with regard to the time frame. You know, that's what it sounds like to me. That because they were specific about saying that this vehicle might be not a person of interest, but possibly a witness. So it sounds like maybe they picked it up on a video camera or a witness saw it in the area. That's where that information come from. And it was pretty specific. A lawman search in New York City, what we would do is, if it was this case, it was in New York, we would work with the Department of Motor Vehicles and say, can you give us all Toyota Tacoma, either red or maroon pickup trucks between the years of 1998 to, let's say, 2002, because they described it as your late 90s, early 2000s. And then what it would do is we would go to a specific area. So we would go, let's say, to the county where these people live, and we would get every registered Toyota Tacoma pickup truck, either red or maroon, in that area, and you'd go and do interviews and talk to the people that own these vehicles. Were you in the area on that day? It might be as little as 1 or 2. It might be dozens. The more information that you have on a vehicle, like if you had partial plate or you had something more specific like the exact year, let's say, you'd be able to narrow it down. But when you do a general, what's called the lawman search, it's a great tool because it gives you any vehicles registered. Now, you might wind up with a fat zero and there's no vehicles registered in that specific area. Then you would expand the search outward, let's say to a couple of the counties or the whole state. And it's just something to do to interview. Now, they talked about the ladder in the back of the pickup as well as white buckets. So during your interviews, if you got, let's say you got a dozen of these and you sent investigators out to go do interviews, if you saw the truck and you saw the pickup truck, you saw the ladder and the white buckets in the back, you'd know pretty safely that you might have the truck that they're speaking about. So if you talk to that person and they're being evasive and say, no, I wasn't, we haven't moved the truck, or I'm not in that area, now you have a little bit more to go on, you know, so you'd be a little bit more substantial in your interview of that particular person. But that's basically how lawman search works.
Phil, I think that you explained it pretty damn well. You know, one of the things that's a favorite investigative tool, and one of the things we always talk about on the NYPD, is shaking the tree. And it's just sort of a metaphor for shaking the tree and what something's going to fall out when you shake the tree. And one of the things we do all the time, of course, is debrief people who are arrested. People are arrested, a huge source of information. And let me extend that to people who are in correctional facilities. They may have just gotten there or been there for 30 days or 20 days. They may have information. People in correctional facilities have nothing to do but talk. And lots of them have information. Some of them have good information. You may even want to send some detectives to the local jail or local prisons and talk to some of the inmates. Liaise with corrections, with probation, with parole. Of course, we spoke about interviewing all sex offenders in this area, right?
100%.
Criminal histories, people that just were released from prison. All this stuff is voluminous and so time consuming, and investigators have to really determine what is worth their while to do. You can't do every investigative technique I'm talking about. You have to sort of, you know, determine what is the most important and what will potentially bear you fruit in this investigation. And then you
also have
that
to
type
have
of
the
stuff.
manpower to do these things too, Bill. You know, I mean, it sounds like they don't have a lot of manpower in the immediate area, but I'm sure they enlisted the state police and the FBI. So, you know, doing all of these things, I think if you were really at a loss for a direction to go, and that's when all of these other things would come into play. But one other thing I wanted to touch on, you mentioned about the what they're releasing to the public. I always was a big believer in preserve the integrity of the investigation by not letting too much out. And the reason being is this: if you say specific things about what took place, like for instance, if a person is stabbed to death with a Bowie knife, and you mention the exact knife that was used, now when you go to do an interview, you'll know if you're in the right direction if they're describing the exact knife as opposed to a butter knife or something, something to that effect. So I like to preserve the integrity of the investigation by not releasing too much. However, there are times when you want to put stuff out into the media and get the word out. Like, for instance, if there's a photo of a video of a suspect or something to that effect. So I'm a big believer in working with the media to get things out. Rewards, that's always a good thing to bring information, like you said, to shake the tree, hoping for something to fall out. But then again, a lot of times, like you said earlier, in the NYPD, they'll release a little bit too much. And that always seems to be like a stumbling block that pops up in an investigation.
Someone asked in the chat, is the local police handling in this investigation? And I know the local police is a very, very small department. Probably not used to a investigation of this scope and this large. So they also have brought in the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation as well as the FBI. So whether they're running it or not, I can't say for sure. But we have those other two law enforcement bodies that are assisting. And I'm sure they have a lot more experience in these big cases. And look, missing person cases are some of the toughest cases that an investigator will ever work. And, the longer it goes on, the more difficult it gets. Phil, you want to touch upon that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I talked about the time frame when it's a search and rescue mission as opposed to a recovery mission. I mean, that just is it's common sense, so to speak, But to touch a little bit about what you just said about the manpower, us being part of the NYPD, a big city, a lot of these cases, they would happen on a frequent basis, whether it be a missing person, a kidnapping, a straight up murder, all the different things that we were experienced with. And a lot of times when these cases would happen, all the necessary units that they have within the police department would respond and jump right into action. Like when I worked in Coney Island, anytime there was a shooting or a murder or something that was, very, very, we had to immediately jump on it. Everybody knew their place, and we would follow all the steps. They almost became routine. Who would be notifying, what you said earlier, like probation or parole, to try and find out parolees, sex offender registry, all the different things. And these are the things that happen in these type of cases. Missing person cases are very, very difficult to investigate when they're straight up. I'm not talking about a runaway or something like that. But a case like this is obviously very frustrating and difficult to work on. But based on what you just said, that it sounds like the state police and the FBI are involved. I think that their expertise and their manpower would greatly help. And, not trying to take away anything from these local investigators, but, sometimes having it happen and being, exposed to it numerous times, you get a lot better at it, as opposed to having only one or two major investigations a year, let's say. So, I think that that's a big factor in this case.
Phil, having said that, I know that, at the beginning of this case, there was like 1,200 people searching, and they've since scaled that back. And I would imagine they also, I don't know the number of investigators, but that would always be a lot bigger in the beginning, and they usually scale that back too. But one of the things is sometimes more isn't always better, especially in an investigation. Sometimes you need to fine tune it and have, a circle of investigators reporting to each other, discussing the case. And I jokingly said the other day, I used to say to my detectives, hypothesizing and theorizing. I say it's good to hypothesize and theorize because that's how you run the case against each other. And I would say, stop hypothesizing. I can't even say it. Stop hypothesizing and theorizing and start typerizing your reports,
Right, right.
They didn't like when I said that, but it is important to hypothesize and theorize because you throw stuff at each other, and whether it could be true or not. Marlena Cantu Thank you for the $5 super chat. She asked, could TBI be calling guy with the red truck a possible witness when he be a possible suspect? Maybe so. They don't scare him away. Marlena, you hit it right on the head. Of course, they could be doing that. Law enforcement doesn't always have to let you know their intentions. And yeah, they want to speak to someone as a witness who's driving that red Toyota truck. No doubt. And, you know, as I said, that information could be, it could be very pertinent to the investigation, or they could be trying to eliminate it as a potential suspect or as a potential witness. But it's always very important. You know, Phil, we've already been speaking for an hour and 5 minutes, and I promised you we'd only do like a half hour, but that never happens. You see, I lied to you, Phil. I'm sorry.
Quite okay. It's quite okay.
I'm sorry I lied to you, but when you and I get to talking, it's tough just to, you know, limit it to 45 minutes.
I think we hit a lot of good points today, too. And I'm sure that there's going to be developments in this case going forward. With the help of God, she's found alive. But if she's found in another form, and I'm sure there's going to be developments as we go along, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this case again. You know, it would be fantastic to have intimate knowledge of the case, but we have to go on what we have, you know?
Yeah, no doubt. And folks in the chat, I want to thank you for staying with us in the chat. And if you're not subscribed to Police Off the Cuff, please go to the YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. You can comment on Facebook. And we're going to stay with this case. We're going to come back as long as this case stays active. We're going to come back. In fact, I think this Sunday night, Duty, Ron, and I are going to go live at 9 o'clock and talk about this specific case. So if you could join us Sunday night at 9 o'clock, we'd really like to have you there. And Phil, you're always the best, man. Right out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. People appreciate your calm demeanor and your knowledge on this case, and we really appreciate having you on the show. Folks, I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff, and with Phil Grimaldi, we'd like to say thank you so much for listening, and have a great afternoon.
Stay safe, everybody.